Hi, this is NQ35, and today I'm going to be continuing on the Jeremiah connection of the Anunnaki gods, Marduk, and Hebrew god comparisons. On the last video, I was reading to you guys a part in Jeremiah 25 um, where it states that the Lord is going to send his servant Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, to come in and to take over Jerusalem due to the fact that the tribe of Judah was not obeying the Lord. So, in this part of this series, I'm going to start out with Jeremiah 16 1 through 13, and I'm going to be reading um, this stuff to you out of the Bible. And then I'm going to explain some things that were happening, and then I'll go back into it. So this is going to be a thorough look at what's being said here. And I'm going to go ahead and start. So we are on Jeremiah 16 1 through 13, and this is called the day of disaster. So it states that then the word of the Lord came to me. You must not marry and have sons or daughters in this place. And he's talking about the land of Judah. For this is what the Lord says about the sons and daughters born in this land, and about the women who are their mothers, and the men who are their fathers. They will die of deadly diseases, and they will not be mourned or buried, but will be like refuse lying on the ground. And they will perish by the sword and famine, and their dead bodies will become food for the birds of the air and the beasts of the earth. Verse 5. For this is what the Lord says: do not enter a house where there is a funeral meal. Do not go to mourn or show sympathy, because I have withdrawn my blessing, my love, and my pity from this people, declares the Lord. Both high and low will die in this land, and they will not be buried or mourned, and no one will cut himself or shave his head for them. No one will offer food to comfort those who mourn for the dead, not even for a father or a mother, nor will anyone give to them a drink to console them. And do not enter a house where there is feasting, and sit down to eat and drink, for this is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says: before your eyes and in your days I will bring an end to the sounds of joy and gladness, and to the voices of the bridegroom in this place. When you tell these people all this, and they ask you, why has the Lord decreed such a great disaster against us? What wrong have we done? What sin have we committed against the Lord our God? Then say to them, it is because your fathers forsook me, declares the Lord, and followed other gods, and served and worshipped them. They forsook me and did not keep my law, but you have become more wickedly than your fathers. See how each of you is following the stubbornness of his evil heart instead of obeying me. So I will throw you out of this land into a land neither you nor your fathers have known, and there you will serve other gods day and night, for I will show you no favor. And that is Jeremiah 16 1 through 13. Now, their fathers and their forefathers, it states, from the time that they came out of Egypt, they did not obey the commands of the Lord, and they worshiped Baal, and they worshiped Asherah. They were worshiping the Canaanite gods, Enlil and his children. So, um, it states in also in this area, you'll see that there was an interjection of their salvation after punishment if you go on. And this is where you see that there's been an interjection about the salvation that's supposed to come to them right after he's just at this moment talking about their punishment. So, because of the things that they did. So, right here, you will see the redactions being made in this instance. And I'll explain this later on, but I'm going to go ahead and go forward. So, God is telling the people not to have children in this land of Judah. And he's not talking about Babylon, he's talking about also Egypt. Okay. So in Jeremiah 17, it states the curse of Judah. So I'm going to turn to chapter 17. And it states that Judah's sin is engraved with an iron tool, inscribed with a flint point on the tablets of their hearts and on the horns of their altars. Even their children remember their altars and Asherah poles, besides the spreading trees on the high hills. And my mountain in the land, and your wealth and all your treasures I will give away as plunder, together with your high places because of sin throughout your country. Through your own fault you will lose the inheritance I gave you. I will enslave you to your enemies in a land you do not know, for you have kindled my anger, and it will burn forever. So, God is explaining in chapter 17 that they are cursed because of their worshiping of the Baals and of the Asherahs. So I'm going to turn to Jeremiah 20. And in Jeremiah chapter 20, verse 1, it's talking about Jeremiah being thrown in chains by this high priest called Pashhur, son of Immer. So it states that Jeremiah was thrown in prison by the high priest Pashhur, the son of Immer, when he heard that Jeremiah was prophesying that the things that I was just telling you about, how the Lord is going to defeat them, and he's going to end up sending in their another country to take them over. So what Pashhur did was he ended up having Jeremiah put into chains and beaten, and then he put him up at the upper gates of Benjamin in the Lord's temple. And so because of this, it states that Jeremiah in Jeremiah 20 verse 3 states that Jeremiah the next day curses Pashhur and tells him the Lord's prophecy to him. And he says that the Lord says, I will make you a terror to yourself and all of your friends with your own eyes, and you will see there that them fall by the sword of their enemies. I will hand all of Judah over to the king of Babylon, who will carry them away to Babylon or put them to the sword. So all of their valuables will go into Babylon, and Pashhur will die there. And so I'm going to paraphrase here. So pretty much Pashhur will die there with all of his friends because of their false prophecies. So Jeremiah in this chapter is prophesying for the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar. And this God who is telling Jeremiah these things is favorable to Babylon and Nebuchadnezzar, his servant. So who is Nebuchadnezzar's God? Marduk is Nebuchadnezzar's God. So in Jeremiah chapter 21, verse 1 through 7, it says that the Lord is letting King Zedekiah know that he will be fighting with King Nebuchadnezzar, his servant, against him. And so where else have we heard the Lord fighting on the side of a foreign king? Well, we've heard it with Cyrus taking over Babylon because of the putting away with the worship of Marduk, the Lugal-Dimarankia, the divine king of heaven and earth. And we heard that Cyrus proclaimed that it was Marduk who marched in like a friend and companion by his side. And so in Jeremiah 21, 1 through 7, I'm going to go ahead and read a few parts here. It states that the word came to Jeremiah from the Lord when King Zedekiah sent to him Pashhur son of Milchiah and the priest Zephaniah son of Maaseiah. And they said, Inquire now of the Lord for us, because Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, is attacking us, and perhaps the Lord will perform wonders for us as in times past, so that he will withdraw from us. But Jeremiah answered them, and he said, Tell Zedekiah, this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. I am about to turn against you the weapons of war that are in your hands, which you are using to fight the king of Babylon and the Babylonians, who are outside the wall besieging you. So they knew what was happening right now. They knew what was going on at this moment. So it's not like it was a prophecy or anything like that. They knew it was happening right then and there. Okay? And I will gather them inside the city. I myself will fight against you with an outstretched hand and a mighty arm in anger and fury and great wrath. I will strike down those who live in this city, both men and animals, and they will die of a terrible plague. After that, declares the Lord, I will hand over Zedekiah, king of Judah, his officials, and the people in this city who survived the plague, sword, and famine, to Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, and to their enemies who seek their lives. He will put them to the sword, and he will show them no mercy or pity or compassion. And so we will see that God of the Israelites in this instance is telling them that his servant Nebuchadnezzar is going to destroy them, because this God that is sending them in is obviously the God of Nebuchadnezzar, because the God of Nebuchadnezzar was Marduk. So this is something to think about, because the reason why God is angry with the Israelites and Judah is because of the putting away with the worshiping and keeping the laws that were given in the covenant of the laws. And what happened is they were worshiping, still continuing to worship the Baals and the Asherahs, which are the Canaanite gods, which ended up being the enemy of not only Nebuchadnezzar's God, but of the Israelites' God as well. So the whole reason why they were being punished was because they were worshiping these other gods, okay? So why would God of the Israelites, who is using a non-Hebrew, okay, one that would be worshiping the god Marduk, to take out the Israelites for worshiping the false gods of the Canaanites, of their Inlalites, okay, these false gods, because they are not their gods, but they were worshiping them, but then choose a king that worshiped another god and not punish him for it, but yet he's punishing the Israelites for doing what they're doing, because it was Nebuchadnezzar's god, okay? It was Nebuchadnezzar's god as well. And that god's name is Marduk. And I'm going to show you and continue reading to you what this God does. So if you go to read on in Jeremiah 21, 8 through 10, it's stating how the Lord is going to destroy Jerusalem and its inhabitants if they do not surrender to the Lord's servant Nebuchadnezzar. So this is what it says. Furthermore, tell the people, this is what the Lord says. See, I am setting before you the way of life and the way of death. Whoever stays in this city will die by the sword, famine, and plague. But whoever goes out and surrenders to the Babylonians who are besieging you will live, and he will escape with his life. I have determined to do this city harm and not good, declares the Lord, and it will be given into the hands of the king of Babylon, and he will destroy it with fire. Well, he's working with Nebuchadnezzar, and he is giving power to Nebuchadnezzar to destroy the city of Jerusalem. So if we keep going, we're going to go to Jeremiah 22:24 through 30. And this is the Lord's curse on Jehoiakim. Now, what people need to realize is that this book in Jeremiah keeps going back and forth. And this is where you see the editing of this book because of the fact that it keeps going from before the exile to after the exile, then back to before the exile, then after the exile. Throughout the whole book, you'll see how it keeps going back and forth. And then there will also be some chapters that you come across where you're going to find out that it's a completely different author. And I will get into that later. Because you'll start seeing things where you can see that there has been an interjection of Christianity into the Old Testament, and I will get into those things later. And you can just tell the author is completely different, especially when you read a lot and understand the history. So right here in Jeremiah 22 verse 24 through 30, it states, "As surely as I live, declares the Lord, even if you, Jehoiakim, son of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, were a signet ring on my right hand, I would still pull you off. I will hand you over to those who seek your life, those you fear, to Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, and to the Babylonians. I will hurl you and the mother who gave you birth into another country where neither of you was born, and there you will both die. You will never come back to the land you long to return to." And it states, "Is this man Jehoiakim a despised broken pot, an object with no one wants? Why will he and his children be hurled out, cast into a land they do not know? O land, 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 hear the word of the Lord. This is what the Lord says. Record this man as if childless, a man who will not prosper in his lifetime, for none of his offspring will prosper. None will sit on the throne of David or rule any more in Judah." So, that is because Hosea was the righteous king of Judah. He had smashed all the Asherah poles. He had desecrated the hill shrines to Asherah and took out all the prostitutes. And I say this in one of my videos. Actually, I talk about it, and I believe it's the Hebrew God of the Bible is not the bull god, or did not like one of those. But anyway, I talk about all this. So Hosea is Jehoiakim's father, and King Jehoiakim was evil. He was wicked and corrupt. They would burn their children in the fires to the gods, and so here we have Jehoiakim, which is Jehoiakim. His father was wicked. He pretty much was the last king of Judah. So this is what it's talking about in this aspect. And if you want to read on, you'll go into the righteous branch in chapter 23, which you're going to find out that this is an interjection so they could place, and this is through hundreds of years of editing of them placing things in there perfectly for the religious sake. So anyway, I'm going to go on. In Jeremiah chapter 23, 25 through 27, where they worship Baal, it states right here in 25 through 27, it says, "I have heard what the prophets say who prophesy lies in my name, and they say, I had a dream, I had a dream. How long will this continue in the hearts of these lying prophets who prophesy the delusions of their own minds? They think the dreams they tell one another will make my people forget my name, just as their fathers forgot my name through Baal worship." So, once again, who's Baal? Baal is Hadad, a dad, one of the sons of Enlil. And Baal is also known as a Canaanite male god of fertility. And so, in this instance of Baal, it is not referencing Marduk because a lot of people think that Baal stands for Marduk, and it does not. The only thing that Baal stands for is Lord. But the reason why I know who he is because these are the gods that they were worshiping, the Canaanite gods. If you look it up in history, you'll see. And when you go through time, you're going to find out which one it was because he's the one that's married to Asherah, and Asherah just so happens to be Inanna. And also you have Baal Hadad or Adad, which is Yahweh in the Canaanite religion. And that's who they were worshiping. They were worshiping Yahweh, which is the Canaanite god married to Asherah. Okay? And it says it all in the Bible. I'm not making it up. Go look it up. So, anyway, in chapter 25, this is where I left off on the last video. It is speaking about how the Lord had warned them of the coming of his servant Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. And so it states in 25, 8 through 9, it says, "Therefore, the Lord Almighty says this, because you have not listened to my words, I will summon all the peoples of the north and my servant Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, declares the Lord. And I will bring them against this land and its inhabitants and against all the surrounding nations. I will completely destroy them and make them an object of horror and scorn and an everlasting ruin." So, in this section of the writing, you can see also when you go on where you can see the writing of how they edited it for the purpose of the book of Daniel. People have to remember that these books have been edited, and we can see throughout the whole book of Jeremiah the back and forth redactions and also different writers during these events. So, to point out a different part of this series in this topic is the fact of Nebuchadnezzar being the servant of the Lord. Nebuchadnezzar, in his own writings and prayers, was reverent to the great god Marduk, just as the Lord in the Bible states to Judah that he will be fighting against them with Nebuchadnezzar. And the interesting interaction with a non Hebrew being the servant of the Lord leads to many eye opening histories, just as in this case of Cyrus the Great being chosen by the Hebrews' God as the servant and anointed one of the Lord. So Cyrus didn't come in to remove Nebuchadnezzar, and I've made that clear in my videos. He came in because the real king at this time, called Nabonidus, had put away or had put a corvée on the people of Babylon and had put away with the worship of Marduk. So the Lord sends in Cyrus, once again a non-Hebrew. Nabonidus was not a Babylonian, he was an Assyrian. So who worshiped the moon god? He worshiped the moon god Sin, Enlil's son, which is Nanar. I'll get back into Nabonidus again at a later time in another video because this is a really deep subject and you have to have a really grand understanding of what's going on here with the history to see everything that's going on. And I'm going to make sure that I tell you guys what is happening here, and you can look it up. But right now, I'm going to continue talking about Jeremiah. So, Jeremiah was a friend of Nebuchadnezzar. And how do I know this? because the Bible told me so. In Jeremiah 39:11, it states, now, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, had given orders about Jeremiah through Nebuzaradan, the commander of the imperial guard, to take him and look after him and don't let any harm come to him, um, but do for him whatever he asks. So, right here shows that Nebuchadnezzar favored Jeremiah, which means that Jeremiah was a prophet of Babylon for the god Marduk. It states, here the Lord of the Israelites and Judah says this. In 29 4 through 9, this is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says to all those that I carried into exile from Jerusalem into Babylon. It states, build houses and settle down, plant gardens and eat what they produce. Marry and have sons and daughters, and find wives for your sons, and give your daughters in marriage, so that they too may have sons and daughters. Increase in number, um, do not decrease. Also seek the peace and prosperity of the city to which I have carried you into exile. It states, pray to the Lord for it, because if it prospers, you too will prosper. And yes, this is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says, do not let the prophets and diviners among you deceive you. They are prophesying lies to you in my name, and I have not sent them, declares the Lord. So, what the Lord is talking about here has nothing to do with the Babylonian priests. It has to do with the Jews themselves. Because Jeremiah told Hananiah that God told him to stop giving the prophecies of the Jews coming out of Babylon in 2 years. And the Lord stated this is exactly where he wanted the Jews, was in Babylon, to educate them, to give them prosperity. This is what it says in Jeremiah. So in Jeremiah 29:15, it states that you may say, the Lord has raised up prophets for us in Babylon. But this is what the Lord says about the king who sits on David's throne and all the people who remain in this city, your countrymen who did not go with you into exile. Yes, this is what the Lord Almighty says. I will send the sword, famine, and plague against them, and I will make them like poor figs that are so bad they cannot be eaten. And that's because they did not obey the command of the Lord for them to go into exile with his servant Nebuchadnezzar and to prosper. He wanted them to go into Babylon. So I'm going to go ahead and conclude this video, and I will pick up from where I left off here, and I will talk to you guys about how they disobeyed the Lord again, the ones that stayed behind, and what befalls them because they didn't go into Babylon where he sent them, and to be safe, actually. He sent them there to teach them a lesson. He sent them there because he wanted them to prosper, and he wanted them to stop worshiping the gods of Enlil and his children, because they would burn their children and sacrifice their children to Baal and them. Not in Babylon. The gods of those parts of the land were the enemies of not only Marduk, but also the Israelites' God. I hope you enjoyed this, and I will continue on Judah and the punishment of the Lord of the Israelites and what happens to them when some of them stay there against the Lord's will. And I'll go ahead and show you how, again, once again, even after they were taken into exile, how God is blessing those that went there and cursing those that did not, and also what he does with his servant Nebuchadnezzar next. Have a great day. I'll be talking to you soon. This is NQ35.